It's solar powered for your bird.
I wish it works like that.
But I do have
Like,
a-
if they buy wine and like later, I mean.
In case y'all didn't print it out. You've been vacationing then.
Tan easy.
How was?
Yeah, it was a mile high, right? So
You're
that was-
closer to the sun.
That's right, yeah.
You eat something?
No, we share. I started looking up the verses, I got about to here. Just got tired.
Are you hanging? Okay. I'll leave these here in case anybody else shows up. So we know everything about God, right? Wrong, because we don't know everything, and we never will know everything, not even when we get there, because then we'd be like God, so, yeah, I guess, whatever. So again, the purpose, for this ongoing series, the first 2 weeks that we talked about God and why we believe what we believe about God. And for the next few weeks, and I don't know if we'll meet next week because it's rally day. We may not do that. I think we probably should all be in community together. Then because we will not finish this today. But the point of this, again, is to help us have a deeper understanding, of what we believe about God, Jesus, and faith. Hey, Katrina, here's a handout. You each want one? Can we share? And the overall thing is to, the more we understand about what we believe and why we believe it, hopefully it'll help us, with some of the fears, that we have, that we kids, have going back to school and what we have in our lives. And part of this was also people coming up to me and say, these people, have a different view of God. It sounds really good. And how can I not refute it, but to, address what we believe, and that's why we're doing this also, to help us, have conversations with our family and friends, or whoever we might be in communication with. And another point of this is to help us see God and Christ in other people, and to try and build relationships to help each other so we can have civil conversations, which a lot of times we can't have anymore, it seems like, in our world. So that's where we are, and where we're going. So I do want to ask, I don't know if it's on here or not. You do know there's a difference between Jesus and the Christ? Do you know that? You don't know that, do you?
How is there a difference?
How is there a difference? Jesus was a human being. And the Christ, as part of the Trinity, we're not gonna understand any of this, or all of this for sure. The Christ, as we're gonna get into, the very first thing is why I put John 1, for our first discussion, about who Jesus is and what we believe about Jesus, what we believe about the Christ. The Christ is, I want to say, is more the second person of the Trinity. And Jesus, was a human being, but he was filled with God, fully human. But many people believe there is a difference. And we're not going to answer that completely just by me talking about that without getting into our first reading here that I listed, because I know it's a very important reading. Because Jesus did not create the world.
God the
The
Father.
Christ.
God the Father. Would you not say
Okay,
that? No?
okay.
Oh,
Let's
sorry.
get into it.
Sorry.
No. I mean, yes.
I thought you
yes,
were gonna say
yes,
yeah.
yes, and no, and other. All right. So the first 5 verses of John's gospel. And if any of you all are available Wednesday mornings, beginning this Wednesday, we're going to start our Bible study will be on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And just incredible wealth of understanding of who God is, who Jesus is, you know, and which will help in our discussion. I know a lot of y'all work, but I'm gonna be recording those sessions and putting them on YouTube, kind of like I do this. So we'll never, first of all, we'll never answer these questions completely about the differences between Jesus and the Christ, you know, and the Trinity and all that. We're just not, you know. What we're going to do, again, is try to understand why we believe what we believe, and then be called to live what we believe. Okay? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and darkness did not overtake it. So in most Bibles, in the beginning was the Word, and you'll see, hopefully in all Bibles, that word is capitalized. So that gives you a clue right there. There's something different or extra going on here. And that word in the Greek word is logos. And from a Greek understanding, logos in this context is, in his first 5 verses, is the essence, not the essence, the purpose, the reason for all of creation. It's not just word. So let me reread this. And you might remember this from Christmas Eve. I think I talked about this. In the beginning was Jesus. And Jesus was with God. And Jesus was God. Jesus was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Jesus. So, Becky, you know, that's what, according to John's writing, and they're basically one and the same but different, right? And without Jesus, not one thing came into being. Even this chair that I'm putting my foot on it as a resting, you know, was created by Jesus. What has come into being in Jesus was life, and the life was the light of all people. And maybe we discussed during who God is. No, we're going to do that next. We're going to talk about and in Jesus was life, and life was light of all people. The next thing on our list is Genesis 1, 3 through 5. Jesus being created as the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness. And the darkness did not overtake it. So what John is trying to tell us is that Jesus, the Christ, is the creator, co-creator, creator, you know, with God. I mean, we can't understand all of that, but what John is trying to help us understand, you know, and we got to read the rest of this to understand it even a little bit more understanding. That Jesus was the purpose for all of creation. Again, with God as the two people of the Trinity. Okay, so Jesus / God created everything, right? What we believe from Genesis, what we believe, and John is making it more clear. Yeah, right. Thank you, John. You know, and we can't really have this conversation without going to Genesis 1 and 3, but we're going to. Well, no, we're not. We're going to skip down to Genesis 1, 3 through 5. Then God said, Genesis 1, 2, you know, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, kind of like an eagle's wings, hovering over the waters. So we have God and the Spirit, in Genesis 1, 1 and 2. And according to John 1, we see Jesus was there also with God the Father and the Spirit. So way far that we'll never understand. But then God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. What day was the sun, moon, and stars created? Do you know?
Day 4.
Day 4. So a lot of scholars, a lot of people believe, and myself included, when God created light, is the light of the world. And then the rest of creation, if you go by John 1, 1 through 5, that light of the world created everything from then on as co-creators with God. And again, we're not ever going to understand that. But there's a point to all this, and I'm going to get to that point, I hope. In the John text, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. In the Genesis text, God separated the light from the darkness. Light in biblical times, good, God, you can see things not hidden, not scary. Darkness, bad. Now, we can learn in the darkness. I think we've talked about that in the past. And we need darkness at times to help us in our understanding. But the light that was created, Jesus, if it was Jesus, he separated the light from the darkness. So everything is based on the light, on Jesus. And so that was the first day. So, and if everything from then on was created by Jesus, for Jesus, for us to care for, as Genesis tells us, that God created everything for us to take care of. Everything was created in love, for all. And we have, gosh, I gotta go back in the God thing. Did we talk about?
So if you say Christ was created or Jesus was created, you run into problems that they tried to solve with the creed.
Yeah.
I think it's easier for me anyway. It's easier to see logos and light as an aspect of God. It's a characterization of some of important things, and logos as wisdom. So Jesus taking on flesh is God's wisdom becoming.
Wait, no, don't go there yet. Because that's where, and I just turned my microphone off. Don't go there yet, because we're going to go there. We can't understand the Trinity. Was Jesus already there? Did he have to be created to be the light of the world?
You can't have him created.
You can't. I know.
Yeah.
But what John is trying to help people know, somehow in our finite minds, about how all of this came about. Yeah, 3 and 1, 1 and 3, we are Lutherans, and that's, they were always there. This is John's way of helping us to see how they were all there, All right, so everything that was created by God, Jesus, the Spirit, because they're all part of it. They're all a part of it, And what did God say at the end of creation?
Very good.
It was all very good. And did we talk about in the God thing when Genesis was first written?
During the exile.
During the exile in Babylon, where the main theology belief about how creation was created was by death and destruction. And God's people started, well, we got a different story. Because that was the Babylonian. The number one aspect of the Babylonian belief about creation was through death and destruction. The god of Tiamat getting beat up by the god Marduk, and they cut her body in half and made the heavens with half and the earth with the rest of her body. So we're seeing out of death and destruction beliefs, we see a story of goodness. And then what you were leading us to is verse 14 of John 1. and the Word, the purpose, the creator of all things that was good, became flesh and lived among us. I think you could translate set up a tent with us. Came and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, God's glory, Jesus' glory, the Christ glory, as the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. That everything was created by God, Jesus, and the Spirit, all three in one. And that creative God that created everything in goodness, for goodness, became flesh. And from his fullness, his life, death, resurrection, and ascension, we have all received, and all means all, grace upon grace. That's why we have this sign back there, grace upon grace upon grace. The law was indeed given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son himself, God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. So John 1 is helping us to see that, God, through all of creation, all three persons of the Trinity are there, and that God became flesh so we could see what God looks like. Not a God of destruction, not an angry God, a retributive God who's out to get you, but a God who created everything in love for all. And as we know, Jesus redeemed all redeemed all in love for all, and the Holy Spirit helps us to know all that. So that's, it's important to understand what John is trying to say here. He's trying to give us some kind of idea how that Trinity works, and no one knows. No one knows. We know they all work together. They're all separate, and they all work together. I can easily define the Trinity. The three circles, God the Creator, God the Redeemer, and God the Sanctifier, and where they intersect, I always put it like a heart. At the heart of who God is as Creator, Redeemer, and Sanctifier. Sanctifier makes us holy before God. That's how God sees us because of Jeremiah 31, and because of what Jesus did for us. That's why we can say God is a God of love for all, because he created everything in love for love, and he came so that we could see that love in person through the person of Jesus Christ. Is he different than the Christ? We can argue that forever. A lot of people, even though he was fully God, he was still fully human. And the Christ, that's way over my pay grade. But the point is, all the goodness of creation, the light of creation, to take away the darkness, and Jesus came to take away our darkness, and the darkness did not overtake him, did not overtake love through Jesus, his life, death, resurrection, ascension. We see a God of all-inclusive love. So
How important is it, do you think, that we actually understand that? If we just believe it? Because that's where I just believe it, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, and I don't understand it either. Okay. I can, draw a picture and I can talk about it. I don't know the fullness. What my knowledge, I can't get my fingers that close of knowledge.
That's what faith is, right?
And that's what faith is. We don't have all the answers, but as we struggle or learn to grow or have new understandings, it's believing it, but then it's living it. If we believe that God, Jesus, the Spirit, created everything in love for all, and calls us to do the same, then that's what we're supposed to do. And sometimes it's hard to have conversations with people that don't believe that. And you can't argue with that. You can't argue with them because that's not going to do any good. But you can.
Well, it's hard to argue with them when you can't explain it.
And that's part of what this is all about. And I don't know how successful this will be or I will be, because these are some, I don't want to say lofty ideals, but it is our reality of what we believe God is and who God is. You know, and John is helping us to see the God of all creation, taking us back to the beginning, is all about a God of love and goodness and not a God of death and destruction as the world then believed, the major part of the world in that area believed. You know, maybe a lot of people in the area today believe. You know, and you can't argue with people. I mean, I lifted up my brother, but we'll have some good arguments about faith. And we have in the past. But we're able to do that. You know, will I change him? Will he change me? Yeah, I don't know. But maybe together, you know, but the point is, once we have a understanding of who we believe God, Jesus, and the Spirit is, you know, as a God of love, they will know we are Christians by our love, by our love. You know, it's great to have knowledge, but as I said in the sermon, I don't have all the knowledge, and you don't either, and nobody does. You know, but what knowledge we do have can best be conveyed by what we do. I think that's really important, and that might be a hard thing for Lutherans to understand, and we've talked about that in the past.
Because it seems like Acts.
Yeah,
Acts in the book.
it's works righteousness or whatever to get God to like you, whatever, you know, and that's so not Lutheran, you know, and I hope it's so not God, you know, because if we're wrong, we're all in big trouble, you know, but you know, it's what we do. It's what we do, and I think it's important to know and to struggle with these type of questions and these theology type things, because again, I don't have all the answers, but John is trying to help us to see the goodness of who God is, and that person, that God became flesh so that we can see what God has done and who God is by what Jesus did. And make no mistake, you know, Jesus calls us to do what he did, you know, to love as he loved, you know, and Jesus loved anybody and everybody. Did he call people out? Did he call people hypocrites and so forth? He absolutely did. He absolutely did. You know, but he did so to help wake them up, you know, to their misguided misunderstandings, you know, of who God was, you know, to get them to change. But in my understanding, Jesus never attacked the sinner. He attacked the sin. And I can prove that in my mind because of the cross. Because Jesus forgave everyone who killed him, even those hypocrites and atheists and agnostics and Greek people and Roman people and everybody else. He forgave the world for forgiving him to help people come into the light and not live in the darkness. So, got all that down, right? Clear as mud, right? And again, we're not going to understand all of this. But as we understand who Jesus was and who he was supposed to be through Scripture, which is going to be the next thing from the Isaiah text, you know, we see what God has always been doing, you know, to try and change people's understanding. We saw that in God in the last two classes we had, you know, in creation, where we talked about what we just talked about, you know, through the fall, you know, through the Noah story, through the Abraham story, and, you know, and how God is trying to help us to see the God of love and not a God of condemnation. And I left out the Cain story. I didn't put Cain in there. And that's an incredible story of a God of love. You know, the guy didn't care about his worship. He just threw in whatever he wanted to for his offering, you know, and he got jealous because God liked Abel's better, so Cain kills his brother. Supposedly one of the other 4 people on earth. You know, and what did God do? Did God kill him? He protected him, sealed him with a mark. Don't know if it was a cross. Looks really good, you know, but if it's all about God and Christ and what Christ did for us, you know, I bet that mark that he put on Cain was a mark of the cross. You know, that you are my child, because as we talked about it was God's plan before even creation that Jesus would have to come and live and die and suffer, and die and be raised, to help us to see and to know and to live the gift of God's grace. And that's why, John helps us to see that God of love from the very beginning in the Trinity, and that love became flesh so we could see it, and we see it through the Scripture, and then, so now I want to, it just wasn't John 1, going back to Genesis 1, I want to read the Isaiah story that we hear. I guess it's every Ash Wednesday for sure. And it's a little bit of a long one. Who has believed what we have heard, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant and like a root out of dry ground. He had no former majesty. He's talking about the coming of the Christ, the coming of Jesus, the coming of the Savior of the world. He had no former majesty that we should look at him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. So it wasn't, Tab Hunter or whoever they used in some of those old Jesus movies, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, good-looking guy. He was despised and rejected by others, okay? A man of suffering and acquainted with infirmity, that people were always out to get him. And as one from whom others hid their faces, he was despised, and we held him of no account. He was despised. And who was he despised by? The religious leaders of the day, who Jesus, like any good prophet, and Jesus, we're doing the prophets on our Monday night class, and Jesus is like the ultimate prophet, but all the prophets were despised, and he was like all the rest of them. Surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. Yet borne our infirmities, carried our diseases. He took all of our sins, to the cross. Yet we accounted him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. Was he struck down by God? Was he struck down by human beings? Yeah. You're right, absolutely. He was struck down by the world, that despised him. But he was wounded for our transgressions, right? Crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole. Because of his life, death, resurrection, and ascension, we are whole. God sees us as pre-Genesis 3, that we are God's perfect children. And by his bruises, of course, I don't know if I wonder what the Greek word for bruises, because he got more than just regular bruises with those 39 lashes and if you saw the Passion of the Christ movie, did y'all see that? It's hard to watch. I think it's important to watch. It may not have been exactly like they portrayed it, but all the Jesus movies, they don't really portray the cross as violent as it was. That movie did, and according to history, that's what they did to insurrectionists, to people who go against the government or whatever. It's a wonder he even survived the beating. But he was bruised. By his bruises we are healed. We are given the gift of salvation that God planned before creation, that was fulfilled through the Christ. All we like sheep have gone astray. We're all sinners. Paul makes that very clear. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We have all turned to our own way, as I like to say, the unholy Trinity of me, myself, and I. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And all means all. Jesus' atoning life, death, resurrection, and ascension was once and for all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. If you know the story, he didn't complain. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before his shearers is silent. So he did not open his mouth. Would it have done him any good? Probably not. By a perversion of justice, the trial, after midnight, when it was illegal to do that, the farce of a trial before Pilate. He was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? For he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. Cut off from the land of the living. If there is a hell, that's where Jesus conquered it, through his death and resurrection. Stricken for our transgressions for my people. And the prophet is speaking for, God's people, which everybody is God's people. They made his grave with the wicked and his tomb with the rich, although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth. And we know that's true, as where he was laid, in an earthly tomb. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him with affliction. That sounds harsh, doesn't it? But it was, and remember, yes, because, what we studied about God, this was planned from before creation, that this would be the way of salvation. So it was the will of God, but we also have to remember Jesus, the Christ, however you want to look at that, part of the Trinity, okay, he had to accept that role, which he willingly did, and be crushed with our affliction. When you make his life an offering for sin, he shall see his offering and shall prolong his days. Through him the will of the Lord shall prosper. God's will through the forgiveness, to help us to live a better life than living a life filled with sin. Because we do create our own hells. I absolutely believe that. I don't believe, as you know, I don't believe there's a physical hell. I just can't go there. It could be, don't know. But we create enough of our own hells. And I can't see a loving God to create everything in love. Jesus redeemed it in love, to have a place of... Jesus says forgive 499 times, so God doesn't. It's just... For me, it just doesn't make sense. Out of his anguish he shall see, he shall find satisfaction through his knowledge. Wow, this is kind of some deep stuff. Out of Jesus' anguish and God's anguish, they shall find satisfaction through their knowledge of what love is, what love looks like, the fullness of who God is, that they would willingly want to go through all of that so that we can know a different, better way of life. The righteous one, my servant, shall make many righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. Again, just saying what he's already said. Therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out himself to death and was numbered with the transgressors, yet he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And again, this is Old Testament leading up to, when all the sacrifices were, did back in, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and all that, leading up to this great sacrifice to forgive all of the world's sins, to help us know a God of love that John is trying to help us see became flesh so we can see that love in action. How confused are we? How many weird questions do you have? Okay.
You cleared it all up.
I cleared it all up.
There's a Christian mystic, I can't remember his name, but he said, I know that I know that I know that I know that I know, but I just can't explain it.
Yeah, I know. You just cannot explain it. But I think as we go through this, again, I hope we can help people see it. Why did we do 653 bags, food bags? Because we believe in a God of love. And that's why we do it. Who cares for those in need? Which kind of leads right into the next thing in Luke 4. When he came to, this is, according to Luke, this is Jesus' first public speaking. Okay? When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, course, you know he was a refugee, had to go to a foreign country. Hopefully was accepted. And then he had to come back. Okay, we won't go there. He went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom, because he had already been preaching, but this is Luke's first time in Luke's gospel that he preaches. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. I don't know if they had a lectionary of the day, but the scroll was given to him. Did Jesus tell him what to say, or was it just part of the lectionary? Don't know. But he got this, he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. I love that part. You know, one of these days I'm going to do that. Because that's how they preached back in the day. I mean, the priest or whoever would sit down while everybody else stood up. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." What does the scripture that he read say to you? Do I need to read it again? "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." Okay? God's Spirit has anointed him. Okay? Because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Whatever the poor is, not just people who are, monetarily, have less. He has sent me to proclaim. Yeah, I got it. Release to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. In this first public statement in Luke's gospel, Jesus is saying, what do you think Jesus is saying? He is saying, "I am." The guy you've been waiting for, Isaiah 53, Genesis 3:15, I'm the guy. All the prophets, because that's what, the Messiah they were looking for. Well, it wasn't the Messiah they were looking for, but Scripture attests, that, God would come to bring good news in a world at that time filled with bad news. It's kind of like today, if Jesus came. The world is filled with bad news, right? He anointed me to bring good news to the poor, again, to everybody. To proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind. To set those who are oppressed free. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Jesus said those words. And I'm not going to read, when we get to the Sermon on the Mount, I'm not going to read 3 chapters. Jesus said those words. He proclaimed that I am. It was absolutely saying, I'm the Messiah. And they didn't like it. But then he lived those words. As you go through the scriptures, you see Jesus predominantly went to the poor. Look at all the healings that he did. All the acceptance that he did. All the welcoming that he did. And you know what's interesting? To a world then, and going all the way back to Genesis, and even our world today, a world that believes God is out to get them, and I do believe that is true. When Jesus opened the scroll to Isaiah 61:2, and I put that in that list also, but you won't have the words. He left off of the last phrase, where it ends, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and that's where Jesus quit. That's where Jesus quit. You can look it up, what I gave you. The rest of Isaiah 61:2 said, "And the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all who mourn." Jesus is trying to get rid of that thought of a vengeful God. Now, I can look at that and say, that is really good news. Because what is the day of vengeance of our God? To comfort all who mourn. What is that day?
Rapture.
No. I'll go with Judgment Day, but when was Judgment Day? It is on the cross. You know, God's judgment on sin and death. But Jesus left out, you know, the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all who mourn. To try to, maybe, this is just me, trying to help get away from what people believed about an angry, vengeful God. Because everything Jesus said was good news. That was going to help people, care for people, love people. You know, it was all good news. And maybe, this is again just me, didn't want to throw in this thing of vengeance because we have a lot of people even today that think God's going to get you, you know, for what you did or didn't do or whatever. So I think he maybe intentionally left that out. But again, I see it as good news. But it takes more explaining. It takes more knowledge that we don't need any more knowledge because we can't understand
I've
it.
never liked God-fearing. I've never liked to hear people say he's a good God-fearing Christian because I don't want to think of it as
I know.
fearful. I mean, I get it.
That meaning means respect.
Yeah.
But people, I mean, how many people know that? Because all they've been told, you better do that. You fear God's wrath.
Right. I'm afraid of my daddy because he's going to spank me really hard.
Yeah.
Thing is,
Yeah, I wish it would say,
Yes.
you know, all feared God, you know, whatever, instead of fear of the
Yeah.
Lord. Because that's what we believe it to mean. But, you know, then you got to take a whole lot of stuff to try to explain that, like I'm trying to explain the Trinity and all this stuff, which I cannot do. And that's why
Did that come from the King James, that fear? Is that
I would,
what-
yeah, I don't know. I'm not that much of a scholar,
Okay, I
you
was
know.
curious.
King James,
Yeah.
from what I've been told, you know, I asked one of my seminary professors, what New Testament, what Bible do you know, is the best translation? He pulls out his Greek.
Yeah, right. That is so funny.
But then you got to be a Greek scholar or a Hebrew scholar for the Old Testament to understand what love means.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's so many different words just for love, you know, and the feminine parts of God, you know, pneuma, the spirit, you know, is very feminine, you know, and you know, going back to Genesis 1, you know, in the beginning God created, in the beginning Elohim created. You know, that's a Hebrew word, and the I am, the im, means plural. So how many people even, I don't know that. So maybe too much knowledge is too much, and we can't take it all in. But we need to have some kind of understanding to help us, again, put it into action. Because Jesus, you know, left off those words, and I think he may have done that, and again, I think, you know, to get away, and I'm here to do good news. I don't want to even have a, you know, little bit of vengefulness or vengeance or whatever, you know, coming out of my mouth.
I've got a little different translation that verse 2 says, to proclaim a year of the Lord's favor and the day of vindication by our God to comfort all who mourn.
Well, see, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Vindication.
yeah.
Yeah, because that is totally different than vengeance. It's totally different. You know, because it is. What Jesus did was vindicate everything that, you know, yeah, by forgiving us. But maybe, you know, again, I'm not a scholar from that standpoint.
But the interesting thing is the people who heard it, much like today, saw it as the gauntlet being thrown down. And
Oh.
they got so angry
Oh,
and they didn't want to believe.
yeah, and in the Chosen series, they had a really good scene on that, where he gets up and everybody's, you know, if you go on in there, this sounds pretty good. What is this, Joseph's son? Where did he get all this knowledge? What can't he do here what he did there? And they're going to throw him off the brow of the hill, and Jesus just, not today, and just walks right through them. I mean, that Chosen series, really good, really good. But yeah, I mean, he's throwing the gauntlet down. but it's a gauntlet, I think, you know, of good news. And that's why we call it the gospel. It's supposed to be good news. That's why, you know, it's a shame. I kind of hate evangelicals on our sign out there. Because what evangelical means today, but euangelion in the Greek, you know, evangelical, it's good news. It's good news, but we don't like good news. So Jesus, and maybe that's why I got John 3:17 next on the list. If Jesus left off that last thing about vengeance, and they would have understood it as vengeance and not vindication, maybe, you know, trying to get good news. Now, you know John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him may not perish, but may have eternal life. Yay. Okay. It's really important. It's really important. Everybody knows that. But, you know, John 3:16, world is not here. In the Greek, I'm pretty sure it says cosmos. You know, everything of all creation, which goes back to John 1. Right? Jesus created everything. You know, everything in the world. You know. And I would like people, maybe people need to memorize John 3:17. Right after John 3:16, right? And since Jesus is talking about good news in this first thing in Luke, here he says, indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Not through you, not through your good works, not through, you know, be saved through him who came to give good news, who didn't just talk about it, he lived it. You know, again, fed people, healed people, changed their minds, whatever. He did everything to help people, you know that they are loved and not condemned. And John 3:17, just incredible, incredible words, you know, for the Christ, or Jesus, however you want to, you know, define that. It's impossible. You know, came to bring peace and hope, not to condemn. It is a really important verse. 12 minutes.
I really liked your illustration of the lady who said, just follow me and I'll take you there.
And she did. I didn't make it up.
And I think in the Lutheran world, the things that we do are things that are that way. If she could have been taking it down the dark alley to steal, but
I mean, who knows?
But you trust and follow,
Yeah.
even though you may not know for sure.
Yeah.
And when you trust and follow, that means doing things that reflect that trust.
Yeah.
And those, you know, what you do doesn't save you, but what saves you is following that person with trust.
Yeah. And it was daylight, and you know, it was open, and so didn't even think about that actually. Now, if it had been nighttime or whatever, maybe, I mean, who knows? Who knows? But that was an interesting day, to say the least. And she can tell you, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know what to do. You know, you just got to give it up sometimes. Safe trip home.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's your mom?
Good.
Yeah.
Got back from Chicago.
Okay. Cool. See ya. She lives in Clarksville. So I'm going to skip, you know, from John 3 to John 13. Kind of hate to read this whole thing, but it's important. Because this John 13 is it's the upper room. You know, in John's gospel, you know, he doesn't institute Holy Communion. Did you notice that? Have you noticed that? You got communion, you know, the institution of Holy Communion in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you know, but it's not in John. His theology is so way up here, but you know, he portrays Jesus' life as a sacrament. You know, the wine, the first miracle of changing water into wine, the abundance of life, the abundance of joy, you know, given through wine. You know, I am the bread of life, you know, the abundance of life through bread. And he talks about, you know, eating my flesh and drinking my blood. You know, so his life, Jesus' life in John's gospel is the life of the sacrament, basically. You know, to give us that gift, you know, but also to show us how to live that gift, you know, and not have to spout off all these things, you know, to have all the head knowledge and whatever to try to convert people. Because number one, you're not ever going to convert anybody. But it's important to have an understanding of what we believe. So in John 13, you know, well, I'll read it and we'll talk about it, and then we'll take us up to where we're going to end for the day. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that, and this is important, John has, I might get this wrong. Jesus, I'm not going to get this wrong, or should I just shut up? One of the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I think on Monday, Thursday are celebrating Passover, but according to John, this was before Passover. And Jesus symbolically, when he died on the cross, was fulfilling, you know, the Exodus thing on Passover. So yeah, it's interesting how the different gospel writers wrote. Anyway, now before the festival of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come. His hour meaning going to his death and resurrection. To depart from the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. You know, all the ones with all their stupid questions, not understanding, you know, get behind me, Satan. You know, you don't know me, Peter. You don't know, who was it? Philip, you don't know me. You've been with me so long, you don't know. I mean, all of that. He loved them to the end. The devil had already decided that Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, would betray Jesus. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand and that he had come from God and he was going to God. Let's talk a little bit about the humanity. Got up from supper, didn't institute Holy Communion, took off his outer robe and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around them. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered, you do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand. Peter said to him, you will never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no share with me. Oh, that's a pretty powerful line right there. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, one who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but he is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you. For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. John didn't like Jesus, I don't think. You know, he keeps jabbing at him. After he had washed their feet, and Judas was there, put on a robe and reclined again and said to them, do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. Yeah, action, putting this servanthood, you know, a God who didn't come to be served, but a God who came to serve and calls us to serve as he did. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly, I tell you, slaves are not greater than their master, nor their messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Do you get a blessing from God? Is that what he's saying there? God gives you a couple stars on your crown? Is that what he's saying? I love when a bunch of us took all these food bags, right? It's blessed. You know, it's a blessing that God gives to us. Not that we have to do it, but bless you. Bless. If you do these things, you're blessed if you do them. You know, we feel blessed when we do something to help someone. We felt blessed when that lady took us down the street. You know, as that guy got us on the right track. You know, as the other people got us on the right train also. You know, we felt blessed, you know, because we were being helped and we helped others.
Well, and she felt blessed to be able to help.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a smile on her face and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just, you know, when we had a compassion meeting at the first of the year, you know, I was asking people how they feel. I just feel good by doing this stuff. And, it, you know, we just need to feel good. You know, and we feel good when we're taking care of ourselves and taking care of others, helping ourselves, helping others. You know, we are blessed if we do that. You know, do we have to do it? Absolutely not. We don't have to do anything. We don't. But because of what Christ did for us, we want to do everything we can, you know, to share that blessing. You know, I do a lot of hashtag blessing stuff out, blessed to be a blessing, you know, because that's what we're called to do. I'm not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but it is to fulfill Scripture. The one who ate bread with has lifted up his heel against me. Yeah, you know. And don't think this is, you okay?
I just have 99 sneezes sometimes.
Okay. Bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. 99 seasons? No. And don't think, you know, when Jesus says, the one who ate the bread of me has lifted up his heel against me, that he's including us. Do you know that? Do you know that? Have you ever lifted your heel up against Jesus? Have you ever done anything not right? Yeah.
And according to this, he did not wash his feet. He did not include him in the meal.
Right.
You know, even knowing what was coming,
Right.
knowing that betrayal.
Yeah.
His love.
And he knew it from before creation. And, you know, knowing, it's you know, I like to think, it's one thing to know what's going to happen, you know, and from Jesus' standpoint, knowing from before creation what was going to happen, you know, but it's another thing to actually go through it, you know, and to experience what he experienced in body, mind, and spirit. You know, and this is against, I mean, he's not speaking just to Judas, so if you don't know that, well, get over yourself, because, you know, we're all, you know, as Paul says, we're all sinners and we all fall short of the glory of God, and that's why, you know, Jesus came to help us, to let us see us as we truly are. I tell you this now before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Very truly I tell you, whoever receives one whom I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. So, you know, God working in and through both of them, God working in and through all of us. You know, God, people see God working through us. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, very truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved. And if you don't know, when you hear that, and you hear it in the great race of Peter and John to the tomb, you know, the one who loved him got there first, you know, went in, you know, it's Rob Bell has a really funny take on that story. It is great. So the one whom Jesus loved, John, was reclining close to his heart. You know, people get, you know, we don't do communion right. You want to do communion right, we need to all lay down in the ground, you know, and lean up against each other and pass the bread and cup around. I mean, that's what they did. You know, they didn't have it's crazy. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, it is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. He knew it. He still washed his feet. He still communed him, as he still washes our feet and communes us. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, do quickly what you are going to do. Now know, do quickly what you are going to do. So Jesus wanted it to happen quick, maybe to get it over with instead of dragging it out. Yeah, I mean, it's human. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, no one knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had a common purse, Jesus was telling him, buy whatever we need for the festival, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. So leaving the light of the world, going out into the dark of night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. You know, that Jesus took the final acceptance, you know, to go to his cross, to be betrayed, to go to his cross, and God has glorified him, and God is being glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once. Little children, I'm with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so I now say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another, because the Christ did not come into the world to condemn the world, that the world might be saved through him. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. How many times did he say love one another in those two verses? Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterwards. Where is Jesus going? And what is he going to do on the cross? He is going to take on, you know, and defeat the power of sin and death. That's why when he told the Jews earlier they couldn't go, he's telling them, you can't do this. I'm the only one that can do this. I can only be the only one that will save the world, you know, through my death and resurrection. But you can't follow me now, but you will follow me afterwards. So there's a little command right there that you're supposed to do what he did. And legend says Peter died by crucifixion. And I don't know if that's true. And I also have heard that he didn't want to be crucified right side up. He wanted to be crucified upside down. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know, but we will follow. We are to, as Jesus said in John's Gospel, pick up your cross and follow me. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Very true, I tell you, before the cock crows, you have denied me 3 times. So, probably not a rooster. You know, the cock crow was different times of the night where they would blow a horn or something. You know, let people know that it's midnight or 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning or whatever. So Jesus knew from before creation. You know, Jesus helped set it all up in motion, you know, to be the light of the world, to bring good news, you know, that he would fulfill all of Scripture. I just did the Isaiah one here. You know, to come and preach the good news, to help people, knowing that it would send him to his cross and to his death, which was his plan all along, to help us to know that God does not come to condemn the world, but to save the world. And as through salvation we are to live our baptismal calling. You know, as I've washed your feet, you are to wash others' feet. And you are to pick up your cross and to follow me, you know, to help us live a little bit better life than what we have right now. And maybe a lot better life. You know, and I know there's a lot of theology that none of us know about or can figure out, you know, but what I'm, again, hoping as we'll pick up the week after next, because we got going on here, with Valley Day next week. But I think the more we can get a general, better than general understanding, I don't know. You know, but again, I'm hoping all of what we're learning will help us to get more involved in doing things, to feel blessed when we take a whole bunch of food somewhere. Or we have that seminar a week from Tuesday on anxiety, you know, to help people, because there's a lot of anxiety going on with school, with the world in general. So we're gonna offer that opportunity for people to, you know, to how to help deal with that, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And I think understanding what we believe, why we believe what we believe, you know, will help with that. So, and we went over. But it's okay, Kathy's not stuck with a bunch of children. Any last questions before we go? If you have any thoughts, concerns, questions, please send them to me. I'll keep them anonymous, but there are no dumb questions. Can I tell my story? Except when we were at the Alamo. We were doing a tour of the Alamo on the bus, and the guy says, make sure you ask all your questions because there are no dumb questions. He goes, well, yeah, I'd have to take that back because last week we had a lady got on the bus and wanted to know why they put the Alamo in downtown San Antonio. Thank you for your time, and look forward to 2 weeks. And if anybody likes to sing, anybody likes to ring a bell, we need to get a bunch of ringers, and we got to find someone to be a director for that. So. Stop recording. Everything going well with you? You got a month and a half? If you, well.
September 8th is scheduled.
Okay, so you still got 2 months. Oh, no.
No, September 8th.
September, we're in August.
Yes.
Yeah, you're about 5 or 6 weeks. Oh.
Yes, yes.
It's coming before we know it.
You're looking great.
Oh, thank you.
There's never this day for the other two.
I don't know if I'd have said that.
Yeah. Right.
You're also never this tired either. I say that because those were only about 5 pounds each.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
Well, that might be a really good thing.
It could be. It may come out 7 or 8 pounds, all you know.
Blake was 7 pounds.
Blake was full term, wasn't he?
2 weeks ago.